You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome everybody to the Fezcast on, we're recording a Monday evening after a game on the weekends that played in sub-zero conditions and has left us with something like a sub-zero feelings, I think. Joining me tonight, Barry, you've gone beyond the... The levels of duty on this one. I mean, this is about your 17th week on the trot. But before we talk about it, we do have to mention that there's a couple of people who would normally do a bit more, but unfortunately, Matt's obviously had some family problems as well, which we've already discussed. But Sam today has come out and had some bad news in his family. So we'd like to wish from all of us on the Fezcast all the best to his family and everything with what they're going through. And we totally understand why he's taking the back seat. But as ever, super sub. Loxy is on the bench. I gave him a shout this afternoon. So David Loxy's joined us, and pretty good actually, Loxy, because you did write quite a scathing report of the game, and in particular what happened after the game, which we will discuss later on the show. But welcome back to the Fezcast, Loxy.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Not necessarily for the subject matter, but great to share your company as always.
Indeed. Well, before we get on to the big whinge, because it will be a bit of a big whinge, I think, this evening, I want to have a whinge as well. And I'm just going to do something before we talk about the men's rugby. Talk about the women's rugby. Not been a great deal of women's rugby on. However, the New Year's Honours list has come out recently. And congratulations to Marley Packer, a well-deserved MBE. I mean, I'll stick my hand in the air. I'm not a person who's particularly interested in the in New Year's Honours or anything like that, to the extent that if ever I was offered one, I'd do the David Bowie and turn it down. But there we go. Although, I had this conversation with mum and dad on the weekend, and that didn't go down necessarily well. But I don't think I'm ever going to get offered one. But the problem I've got is, and Nick Heath posted this on Instagram, Loxy, and I'll come to you first. Nick Heath pointed out that in 2003, England won the Rugby World Cup. And every single member of that team got a gong of some description. And Sir Clive Woodward became Sir Clive Woodward. And quite rightly, because they'd achieved something that no other English sports team up to that point had done since 1966. And the England men's football team. This time now, the women have won the equivalent, their Rugby World Cup. And only 5 of the players, and the coach, have got a gong, and you think, well, that's just totally unfair, Loxy, isn't it, really? I mean, I understand you look at Zoe Aldcroft, the captain, you look at John Mitchell, you look at Marley Packer as being the long-standing players, and Emily Scarrett probably as well, as long-standing players are in that squad. They deserve perhaps the bigger gong, but all of those girls should have got something, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm really, and Marley got an OBE, by the way, not an MBE. She was one of the higher echelon ones. But then you can make, I've seen people making individual cases for other players, and you've made one or two there yourself. This was the same weird thing they did with the England footballers in 1966. In a very piecemeal way, they gradually picked up bits and pieces over the years until there was a sort of blanket recognition when most of them are either dead or dying. I don't know why this happened. And massive congratulations to Marley and to John Mitchell and the other players who won. But no, I think it's unjust.
Yeah, I mean, Barry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the honours system now is a bit outdated for me, to be quite honest with you. Perhaps it's an opportunity going forward to look at it and say, when it's a team sport, and obviously with rugby it's a bigger team as well, perhaps there should be some sort of team recognition rather than individual ones for something like that, where it's a team effort. But yeah, it's a shame. I'm sure most of the players will end up with something at some point in their careers, but definitely Ellie and Jess should have got something for sales to cowboy hats.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And then, of course, you pair it with how football is treated, and the women, congratulations, they all did great, but they've got better gongs. So rugby union seems to be a second-class sport to football. And then Sports Personality of the Year award, the Ryder Cup, which had like 2 British players in it, they get Team of the Year when, I just... Rugby union there seems to be a problem around rugby union, Loxy, and everybody is undervaluing what is a great sport. And these girls really, I think, have been treated pretty shoddily. In the same way as one of my great heroes, Bobby Moore, never got nothing what he deserved, despite being the England football captain when they won the World Cup.
Yeah, it is. I mean, okay, the thing with the sport in general, isn't it? Rugby union versus golf, a lot more people play, probably a lot more people watch it, particularly on worldwide TV. We obviously know why the women should have got the BBC Team of the Year award, that particular set of awards. But it was always likely it was going to be the golfers, wasn't it? Just based on broadcast popularity and coverage.
Although you say that, I mean, the Sports Personality, let's make the point as well. Why wasn't Maratoji on the list, on the white middle class list? I mean, Maratoji, British Lions captain. There's only been 2 men this century that have captains are winning 6 nations, British Lions series. I mean, he should have at least been on the list, shouldn't he, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly make a case for him, but I mean, at least with the BBC Sports Personality of the Year awards, they are based on a public vote, so there is some sort of general input into them. Whereas the New Year's honours, the King's honours, and every other set of honours that comes along just seems to be, well, it's a bit of a mystery to me, to be quite honest with you.
We won't point out the joke I put on Facebook the other day. If you follow me on Facebook, go and have a look at my post about it. It is quite funny. It's what I bring out every year anyway. But there you go. Right, so we have stop that there. Get rid of that whinge, and we'll play our normal advert, and then we'll come back and talk rumours first, and then we'll dissect what happens down at Natalie Wood Stadium or whatever the bloody hell it's called.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hello, this is Akina Gondwe of Saracens Women, and you're listening to the Fezcast, and we are both proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association. For a £10 annual subscription to the SSA, you'll get the chance to buy tickets for away matches, receive a regular newsletter, and an exclusive SSA badge. They also arrange pre-match gatherings and player-coach events. As well as sponsoring both me and the Fezcast, they also sponsor Louis Johnson from the men's team and the Saracens Foundation Track Club. Not bad for £10. You can join up at membermojo.co.uk/SSA. Enjoy the rest of this edition of the Fezcast, and I look forward to seeing you at StoneX. Come on, you Sarries.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody, and let's move on to the men's game. And first of all, let's talk about some rumours, shall we? Because it is silly season, it's Christmas. The big news is, it would appear, we discussed in previous weeks about how Theo McFarland has been playing out of his skin and has been playing out of his skin, and how he's perhaps playing for a contract. And we were all hoping it was playing for a contract at StoneX, but it appears he might be playing for a contract for whoever's got the biggest checkbook at the moment. It appears that La Rochelle have got that big checkbook out, Loxy.
Yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? I mean, the first thing I'd say is that Theo McFarland is a tremendous asset. He's just turned 30 years old. He's a late starter to the game, wasn't he, with a basketball background. But I do think, this is one I'm slightly concerned about. I think he'd suit the French game very well. And I'm not thinking that he's quite as wedded to Saracens as one or two of the others might be. I'd be terribly sad to see him go. It's a career move for him. I don't think it would do him any harm.
No, you're right there, Lux. And I think this is the important thing to mention, Barry, isn't it? In so much as that when you bring young players through, when they come through the club, you get loyalty from the likes of Jamie George and Owen Farrell. And yeah, no, Owen went off to Racing, but that was more, I think, to do with just resetting himself. But Jamie George has had checkbooks opened in front of him. I'm sure Nick Ezekwe has him, and he went to Northampton. I'm sure Northampton admire him and that. Nick Tompkins went down to Wales. He could easily have stayed down to Wales. But when they come through the system, it's a lot harder for them to accept a bigger check somewhere else because they have that loyalty. If you're bringing in players from elsewhere, and I'm not saying this in any way being critical of them because it's a short career and you have to make the most money you can. But Will Skelton came to us. He then was offered a bigger check somewhere else. Vincent Kopp was the same. You know, you don't stand in the way of those players. You maybe think perhaps, you know, when they get a bit older and they want to come back somewhere that they remember Saracens when they're whatever. But, you know, you can't knock a player who is mindful of how their career is going. That if an opportunity comes along, Barry, they're going to take it, aren't they?
I've always thought this with not just in rugby but in all sports. You can't knock players or people for taking better offers. We all do it in our professional lives for the most part, or I certainly have. And you know, if someone comes along and says how much you want to come and join me, and you give them a price, and they say, oh yeah, that's fine, then you can't really blame players for doing it. As you say, it is a short career. It's nice when we get the loyalty that we get from the likes of Jamie George and one or two others, but at the end of the day, they are players and we are fans, and we have an attachment to the club that players and to a degree coaches don't really have.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing. Is I did see a post the other day, Loxy, where someone had posted about, you know, there seems to be an exodus of players, which I don't necessarily see it being an exodus. But, you know, bemoaning the fact that we can't sign more players or keep players and everything, there's a reason behind that. You know, we've got to be whiter than white. And if we're coming close to the salary cap, at the end of the day, if Theo McFarlane's worth £50,000 a year more in his contract and that takes us over the salary cap, well, Theo McFarlane's going to be shipped out where he can earn his £50,000 a year more, isn't he?
Yeah, the microscope's forever on us, which is entirely our own faults. But, you know, we can't complain. We will complain. And there's a lot of knee-jerking reactions, aren't there? You know, oh, God, mass exodus of players. No, this is a time where players do come and go. You know, and people tend to look at the exodus and perhaps not look at the players who are coming in. If you look at our men's squad, I mean, there is a surplus probably amongst the second and back row forwards in certain places at the moment. You know, there is room for one or two to disappear, particularly, you know, in the light of George Martin's signing. So I don't think it's ready to you know, hit the panic button just yet. I mean, we might do that a little bit more when we discuss the game, but not from this point of view, I don't think. And given that we're always thrown out there as our players or us as a possibility for people to come to by the press or their agents or whatever else, I don't think there's been quite so much surrounding us now as there has been in previous seasons.
No, you're right there, absolutely. And of course, the other thing to remember as well, Barry, is we only have to look at Exeter Chiefs, don't we? 2.5 seasons ago, you look at the quality of player they lost to the likes of Luke Cowan-Dickey and Jack Rowell moving on. There was a huge exodus, shall we say, of players from that club. It's taken them 2 to 3 years to get back. But now, you know, they've invested in their youth coming through. And, you know, some canny purchases as well. And you look where they are. They're flying high and playing some brilliant rugby, Barry.
Yeah, they've always had quite a good youth and academy system tied in with Exeter University as well, obviously. And they've got that benefit. But you're right, they've added a few wise overseas signings, which may be on the slightly cheaper side of things, if you like, rather than trying to shop in the same pool as the other Prem clubs and the French clubs. But yeah, they're flying. They're playing a great brand of rugby at the moment, and yeah, they're a joy to watch, unlike certain other teams.
Yeah, they are indeed. Well, perhaps now's the time to move on to the game on the weekend, which was pretty depressing, really. I mean, Let's do the three word reviews first, Barry, shall we? Because I'm sure that's going to be very interesting. I know Hanky sent us one again, and it was young guns on earlier, and that's certainly something that I think we need to discuss when it comes to the game. But what are three word reviews like, Barry? And does the people at the club need to put their tin hats on?
Well, yeah, this could take a while. Let me put it that way. So Gareth Baxter says disjointed performance again. Mark Todd, disappointing halfway stage. I think he's talking about the whole year there. Josh, playing within ourselves and backs too slow. I'll come back to the backs in a minute. Tim Hobden, lacking an identity. Rob Smith, so far behind. Now, back onto the speed. Millicent Bystander suggests we have the slowest backline imaginable. Well, one with us three in it would be slightly slower, you would imagine, but perhaps not much. Connor Boundy says need for speed, and David Archer agrees with him, far too slow. Divide Celos, same old story. The Crusty Colonel, Chris G, hard to watch. And James Unite says tough to watch. Back to the centres again. Carway, need new centres. Rue Cayford and Gavin McGuckin, beg pardon, I'm sorry, Gavin, are stuck somewhere in the bathroom, I think, because from Rue Cayford we've got piss poor performance, and from Gavin we've got attack is a pile of. I'll let you all fill that one in for yourselves at home. Disillusioned pensioner, pick on form. Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I'm sure we'll come to the selections and how some players seem to be a permanent fixture despite the lack of form. Good times over, says Rob Deplage. That's a good name. James, I've cut off some of his name. Apologies there. James, transition my backside. Well, backside wasn't actually the word he used, but never mind. Fine wine, sadly, change time. Yes, I think we'll come to that. Roger King gives us pressure is off, and Hank K, obviously young guns on earlier, and Oliver Archer agrees with him, play some youngsters. And finally, draw breath, Jimbo, Arsene Wenger similarities, which is quite funny because we were discussing that on our little WhatsApp group, but personally, I didn't see that.
No, yeah, I mean, where do we start with all of that, Loxy? Now, I tell you where we're going to start. We're going to start with your post, because you were pretty miffed, weren't you, after the game, Loxy? And more, not necessarily with the performance or the result, but the attitude, I think, which was seemingly typified by what happened after the final whistle.
Yeah, I'll just read out what I said. It's very brief. Thank you to the couple of players who came over to specifically acknowledge the travelling group, Charlie Bracken and Theo Dan notable amongst them. The supporters group has high levels of patience and perseverance, but that could become tested if the team is not that bothered about them, is what I actually said. And that's probably what I felt pretty much when I wrote it, because I was freezing cold like everybody else. We'd organised a group, we'd taken it up there. Now, we're not entitled people. You're talking about the most diehard of diehard supporters there. Look, I've travelled all the way to Pretoria and had the team swan straight past, whereas I've gone to Durban and had virtually each person came and shake our hands. It rather depends on how the team's feeling on the day. But when you've got a group of players standing just a short distance in front of the very supporters that have been yelling their heads off for them often, and they're just peering over their heads to try and find their significant others and families, which we completely understand. You think they might have at least given us a wave or come over and shook a hand or two. Lucio Cinti came over as well, bless him, and he did tap hands. His girlfriend was standing right by us, but the fact is he did acknowledge the fans, and I probably shouldn't have left him out. But you know, a limp wave from the centre spot by the skipper didn't really go down massively well, particularly as we'd been singing from the time the coach arrived to the time of the final whistle. So I'm not saying that supporters are entitled to anything, but I do think in that particular circumstance, the players could have shown a little more effort than that.
It will be difficult for them. I do have a little bit of sympathy because obviously the weather, as we said, they would be cold as well. I mean, I was watching the Bath game at the weekend, and poor old Alfie Barbary was wearing about 14 layers for his Man of the Match award, and we're still saying, I'm cold, can we hurry this up? So I do have a little bit of sympathy for them. They wouldn't have been feeling particularly great amongst themselves or within themselves. they would have been cold. They wouldn't have wanted to hang around for too long. But yeah, it wouldn't have taken much for them to just come over and shake a few hands or bump some fists or whatever. It would have taken 30 seconds, and it would have brought them a lot more goodwill than their behaviour has.
Yeah, and it would be something I will revisit back at towards the end of this because there's something coming up which might be quite interesting. But let's have a talk about what happened on the pitch. And I think I posted on our WhatsApp group, Barry, the first 15 minutes, are we still on the bloody M1? And it seemed like, I don't think I can remember, let's be honest about it, you're never going to get 80 minutes where a team is on the ascendancy in any game. And let's be honest about it as well. Going away to teams like Leicester, you shouldn't be going there expecting to win, number one, right? Great result if you do, but coming away with that with a try-scoring bonus point, on the face of it, wasn't a bad result. But how many games have we either not bothered starting for the first 20 minutes or we switched off for the last 20 minutes? And this seems to be the problem. It's not, attacks this, attack, or, the sentence too slow, or whatever. It's something to do with attitude, I think, at the moment, is lacking. And it took a 15-0 head start for us to suddenly realise that we're meant to be playing rugby today, Barry.
I don't know if it's attitude, but there didn't seem to be an awful lot of leadership on the pitch until Mauro turned up for Nick, who obviously failed his HIA. But sometimes you're not going to play well. You have to accept that, and it only takes a few players to be off form for it to affect an entire team. But some of the play was quite shoddy, and you can accept that. But what is harder to accept is the fact that no one looked particularly bothered, and it wasn't like someone was getting them behind the posts into a group and saying, look, we need to sort this out, we need to do X, Y, Z. We just carried on doing the same things that we've been doing fairly poorly from the start. And as I say, it wasn't really until Mauro turned up that we seemed to get a bit of leadership out on the pitch, which was disappointing.
Well, yeah, and I mean, let's be honest about it. And Ivan van Zyl, if you're listening to the first cast, which I'm sure he probably doesn't now because he's at the rounds of the kitchen sink for the last few weeks, but I'm afraid he's going to get it again, Loxy, isn't he? Because what seemingly typified the Saracens' performance was the goddamn awful intercept pass he threw. That, to be perfectly honest with you, giving it to Adam Radwan at his pace is just a suicide note. But I think I would have read that one and would have stood a chance to get away. But what made it worse was two things. One, it was so obvious that was going to happen, and you got Theo Dan, who had a pretty good game, I thought, coming in on the short pop, screaming for the ball. You could see him screaming for it, and Ivan van Zyl still just passed it to Adam Radwan. It was like, I want Adam Radwan to score almost. He had the inability to change his mind on the hoof is worrying, but then to see him just put his head in his hands and stop, yeah, you're not going to catch Adam Radwan, but at least make it look as if you're going to give it a go. Is that fair, Loxy?
No, I can understand the feeling, and those feelings were expressed and shared by a lot of people sitting around me the game. Sorry, just remind me, who threw the ones for Henry Herald all at the StoneX? That was Ivan, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, there was a terrible case of deja vu for those of us who actually saw both of the things, and the reaction was actually quite similar. I mean, and by the way, all the people who talk about playing Lucio Cinti on the wing, they should have watched him try and chase Adam Radwan. No, he's not quick enough to play on the wing. I mean, he was shown a clean pair of heels about 9 times over, and not on that particular phase. But anyway, no, Ivan, look, let me get something off my chest, if I may. I think Di Flanagan is a good and innovative attack coach. I see the attack getting a lot of flack at the moment, but I don't think you can implement anything that Di Flanagan wants to implement with Ivan at 9. You can with Charlie. You could with Gareth Simpson, who seems to be the forgotten man of all the discussions. He's a very good scrum half, by the way, and another left-footed scrum half who was a fine scrum half for Worcester before he came to us. And, of course, Thomas will be coming. Now, you'll certainly be able to put a few innovative attacking patterns into shape with him. But I don't think we're getting the best of Di Flanagan, let alone a lot else, and his coaching skills with Ivan. And I apologise to Ivan, who's a nice man, but I'm sorry, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I can't disagree, and it was highlighted more so by the fact that when Charlie Bracken came on, the pace, the accuracy, the speed, everything just went up 20%. And, you know, I don't know why the coaching staff are looking at what we're looking at. I think personally I'd have brought Charlie Bracken on after 30 minutes because Ivan was just not driving the team forward. And I would have started with Charlie Bracken, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think he's the better scrum half, Barry.
Yeah, it's obvious to us that there's something wrong. For all that the coaches can come out and say, I mean, some of the stuff that McCall came out with after the match was we weren't up for the physical battle. Is something about an attitude about some of the players. That's fine. You can say things like that, and you can say that, Evan's either not doing what you told him to, or he's doing it poorly. But if you keep picking him week after week, it's going to come back to you. It's not an attitude. It can't be an attitude thing if you keep picking the guy, because if you keep picking the guy and he's not doing what you want, or he's not doing it well enough, that's down to you as a coach. Give the man a rest for heaven's sake. Let's see Charlie. At least if Charlie doesn't do what we're hoping he will, at least we'll have given even a rest and maybe allowed him to work a little bit on his confidence, because maybe it is a confidence thing. But yeah, that intercept pass was awful, and I don't know if you've seen it back on the TV, Loxy, but it's even worse on television because you can see it coming. You can see it coming a mile off, and no wonder Adam Radwan was in the right position. Yeah, you're right. No one really is going to catch him, because he is exceptionally quick and an exceptionally good player. One we allegedly missed out on, I believe, a couple of years ago. But yeah, it was desperately disappointing, and it was desperately telegraphed, and that really did set us back in the game as well, because we just started to get a little bit of a foothold, and then we go and do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, I hate digging out individual players. So I'm actually going to include Ivan in a larger core of players who need to be digged out. And that's the senior players. Because there's senior players at the club at the moment who, I think it was mentioned last week, are ruining their legacy. And another player who's going to get round to the kitchen sink now is Elliot Daly. Elliot Daly had an absolute stinker on the weekend. He did some great things, but his attitudes, which was typified by a petulant, cheap shot late hit on Billy Searle, where he threw his shoulder into him, he was lucky only to get a yellow card for that, because that was cynical. And it was not nice to see. And I don't like to see that sort of attitude from any player in any team, but particularly not from a team that I support. And another senior player I'm going to call out is Max Maynes, because I thought Max Maynes, until he made the break, which may have come because Charlie Bracken was giving a bit of quick ball, but up until then, he didn't look interested. He didn't look as if he cared. And I might be unfair on Max, and apologies, but I'm just saying this as a fan, and as someone who, if I was given a Saracen shirt for a day, would be absolutely useless, but would do everything I possibly could to be the best I possibly could. And I don't think Max Maynes will entertain. But Elliot Daly went through that game and ended up getting wound up by a 20-year-old kid playing standoff in his first proper season for Leicester. And he was allowing him to be wound up by him. Whereas it should be the other way around. The older head should be, putting that boy under pressure and making him make mistakes. And Elliot Daly was totally outfoxed, out everything by Billy Searle, wasn't he, Loxy?
Totally. And it was a very entitled and unpleasant attitude he showed, and no one had a good word to say. And I'd say that everybody was critical of Elliot Daly as an Elliot Daly fan. I am. for example. But I was cringing actually at some of the things. I mean, it was some weird things. I mean, he was one of the principal architects of actually kicking the ball aimlessly up in the air, which is, one of the major failings of this side. And if it doesn't come from that particular phase, tries to come from the resulting possession. But, then he hurt his leg, and which was great for about, well, not for him, but it was great for 10 minutes because he couldn't kick it because it was his left leg. So for a while, he actually passed the ball, kept the ball in hand. We looked a little bit better. But it wasn't just that drop in the shoulder thing. I mean, when Alex Lazowski, ridiculously wrestled through Billy Searle to the ground. I don't know what poor Billy Searle thought of that whole thing after that, because he was man of the match by a street. He ended up getting sent off himself 3 minutes from the end. But, I mean, Alex Lazowski suddenly wrestling throws him to the floor, and Elliot jumps on him, while he's lying on the ground. I could not understand. It's just like a frustration that things aren't going your way, so you're just going to kick up about it, and that's what it looked like. It looked childish and it was ugly, I thought.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I mean, personally, if I was Mark McCall and Joe Shaw and the rest of the coaching staff, I'd have had them in this morning, and I would have read them the absolute right acts. And they may well have done that, Barry. They may well have done that this morning, and I wouldn't expect them to come out and say, "We've read the team the right acts." It's the old Alex Ferguson. We mentioned Arsene Wenger. They never saw anything, but behind closed doors that Ferguson would get the hairdryer out regularly. I just think they need, for one of the better words, an absolute bollocking. And we're the ones giving it to them now and voicing a lot of fans' frustrations. I think they should be listening to this and understand where we are at it with it, Barry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that words are being had in private, and you cannot expect any of the coaches or the DOR to come out and say publicly what they say in private. But yeah, it was ugly. It was unnecessary. I'm sure it was born of frustration with themselves, because they would have known that they weren't at the level that was needed at the weekend. But yeah, we could do without it. It didn't gain us anything, did it? At the end of the day, I mean, it was all silly and cost Daly 10 minutes on the sideline.
Yeah, quite rightly. It cost him a lot more. I mean, before we talk about the coaching and the criticism that is coming their way at the moment, I think we do need to look at the bright spots. And Loxy, I did say it at the start of this preamble, going to Leicester Tigers are coming away with a try-scoring bonus point, given the fact that what's keeping us in the fight, as it were, for that top four is the fact that we get bonus points at the moment, if nothing else. You'd have accepted that, wouldn't you, really? I mean, it's not going away to Leicester and losing with a try-scoring bonus point that's going to cost us our position in the league. Is other things, getting beaten by Harlequins who seemingly can't muster a team to do anything at the moment. I mean, as I say, as bad as it is for us, at least we're not Quins, aren't we? But, it's losing at home to Exeter Chiefs and all those sort of games, isn't it, where it's cost us. But, on the face of it, going to Leicester Tigers and getting a bonus point isn't such a bad result, is it?
Well, I'll say I'd be happy with it when it actually happens. But no, I was more annoyed the fact we didn't have the gumption to land a penalty to nick the extra point, because we're only 1 point short of getting a second point in that match. And we still had about 6-7 minutes left to do something about it. But to be honest, we turned into headless chickens at that particular moment. And or promising moves ended up with the ball being dropped. It just looked a bit panicky. So we really could have pulled actually 2 points out of that game, which would have been a bit of a travesty probably from every point of view. But boy, wouldn't have that been something, if we'd come away with a couple. I'm sure Mark McCall would have been relatively pleased, instead of saying afterwards he didn't know what was happening, which is not the sort of thing I want to hear from a director of rugby, to be honest. If anybody should know what's happening, it should be him.
The clues in the job title, isn't it? And we'll discuss that in a minute. Now, I mean, I do want to mention some players, though, that I did think had good games. I've already mentioned Theo Dan. I mean, he had a few trials at line-out time, but I think that was more to do with Leicester having a very good line-out themselves that just was disruptive, and that sometimes happens. I thought Hugh Tizard had a good game. A solid game. I mean, nothing special. Theo McFarland, we've already mentioned him. I thought he had and he's having some really good games. But the player I think who, Tom Willis keeps on getting all of the plaudits and the headlines and everything. But two players that are high up my list for potential players of the year this season. One in the front row, Reece Curry, who got a couple of cracking turnovers and really did work hard in that scrum and got some scrum dominance for us. Him in the scrum, Barry, and in the backs, Rotimi Shegan, just, it's chalk and cheese between him and Max Maynard on the other wing, I felt, on the weekend, Barry.
Yeah, Rossi always looks like a threat when we get him the ball. We don't give him the ball often enough, in my opinion. But yeah, Reece was very, very good. Picked up a couple of very good jackals in the first half, and obviously got on the board as well. So yeah, he's playing out of his skin. I thought, as a pack, I thought we did okay. I know it wasn't Leicester's strongest side in the forward, so they're missing a few as well. But I felt as a pack we did collectively okay, and that's probably because more of the brighter players were forwards rather than backs. I think it was once the ball got away from the forwards, I felt that's where we had most of our troubles. But yeah, I think you're right to big up those players. They had decent games whilst all around them were losing their heads.
Yeah, and it was younger players who, Reece Curry's not a younger player, he's an established international, but younger players seem to be the ones that were doing the right things. I mean, you can never argue with Nick Tompkins' effort. He always puts huge amounts of effort in, but I just don't think he was being given any support around him, unfortunately, to be able to do what he normally does. But yeah, it was young players. And you're right as well, Barry. The other thing that changed the game a lot was Maro coming on Loxy and taking over the captaincy and actually driving the team forward. I mean, he does his normal thing. I mean, he's omnipresent across the field. But he did make a huge difference. And, we do miss Murray when he's not on that pitch, don't we?
Yes, we do. And, he's iconic in every way, isn't he? But his demeanour was slightly odd arriving from the bus. He was quite grim. And he remained more or less stoically grim for the whole day. So I'm not quite sure if all was well with him, but he did play extremely well, or he perhaps stood out where others perhaps weren't playing as well as they might have done. Yeah, he was outstanding. Totally agree with the two that you singled out, and I particularly think with Reece being such an asset in the scrum, it's with Marcus Street he scrummages best, and he's actually expressed the fact that he enjoys scrummaging with Marcus, which is no disrespect to Marco, who's a very good player. But when you've got Street and Carey in that front row with whichever hooker you stick in the middle of them, Jimmy Hadfield or Theo or Jamie, the front row looks very, very solid. But,
Yeah. Then the other player who I felt made a difference when he came on was Juan Martin Gonzalez. I mean, he is different custard. And I mean, this is my fear going forward. We talked earlier on about the potential exodus. You talk about French clubs opening checkbooks and turning heads of players. Saracens have got to get it sorted, haven't they? Because if we don't see improvement and we don't see us making steps forward to get back to somewhere where we were 5-6 years ago, albeit we know what that was all about, players like Juan Martin Gonzalez, if Biarritz or Bordeaux or Toulouse or whatever, and they are looking at players like Juan Martin Gonzalez, they open the checkbook. Are Saracens this season, next season, going to be matching that player's ambition? Because I don't think it's necessarily as much about money as matching that player's ambition. You're Juan Martin Gonzalez playing in an Argentinian side, which has got a profusion of great back row forwards at the moment. He needs to be playing at a level where he gets seen by his international coaches, doesn't he, Barry?
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about the depth we've got in the back row, but just to flip back slightly to the rumours that have been swirling around, I mean, I'm in no position to know how much truth there is in them, but as well as Juan Martin Gonzalez, and Theo McFarland. You can also add Andy Onyama Christie, and obviously Tom Willis is going. So there's 4 back row players that would start for most sides in this league that we either are or reportedly might be losing. So yeah, we seem. I could be wrong, but it feels like we're struggling to get players in through the door a little bit at the moment, and also struggling to tie the ones that we've got down. So it would be handy. It would be handy. It would be good, I think, if we could either get some back row in or tie down the ones that we've got and be sure that they're going to be here next season, because, you know, that clock is ticking. And I mean, without wanting to go too far down the Jason Gilmore road, we're almost looking at this season being over, potentially, in terms of challenging. The top 3 seem to be running away with it in the Prem, and I don't think we're going to be consistent or good enough to nick that 4th spot somehow. I mean, it's still possible, but it's going to take a massive turn of fortune and form. But yeah, we need to have next season nailed down sooner rather than later, I think, if we are to progress.
Yeah, absolutely, we are. And that, I suppose, brings us on to the question of coaching. Now, I don't think in Mark McCall's time has Mark McCall come under this level of pressure from fans, from what's going on the pitch, from himself. And bear in mind, I interviewed him at sort of the beginning of the season, and he seems up for the fight. He seemed really determined, excited, infused by being part of a rebuild, and he's looking at it being a 5-year rebuild. But suddenly I look at him, and my wife Sharon sits there and looks at it, and she looks at it from a slightly more detached position. And Loxy, you know Sharon quite well, and where she comes from. And she sits there and looks at him and says, I don't think Mark McCall's happy. I don't think Mark McCall is well. I don't think Mark McCall, he hasn't got the fire anymore. I mean, and that was perhaps borne out by what he's been saying and what you've said. The director of rugby who says he does not know what's going on is basically signing a sheet that says, I don't want to do this job anymore, Loxy.
Well, if my memory doesn't fail me, didn't he have a little breakdown spell a few years back where he had to take some time out? So I think, you know, things can get to Mark. I think the thing that's probably, I mean, I'm speculating, but I think the thing that's probably really getting Mark's goat at the moment, they've got the personnel to be much better than this. And he probably thinks he has got the right personnel within the club at the moment, either the people that we've signed or the youngsters coming through. I've got an issue about the fact I don't think we utilise the young talent we've got in the backs enough. But amongst the forwards, I think they've got a good solid rotation going on there. So if I was in Mark McCall's shoes, I think, well, how come it is we're the guys who are supposed to get these very good players functioning properly, so why aren't we? That, I think, is probably his biggest frustration. Now, he's essentially a coordinator, isn't he? You know, he's like your last call, really, last call McCall. But what he is, you know, he's coordinating a bunch of coaches with specialist skills and then pulls the whole lot together, pulls the whole strings. So when you've got the old McCall must go nonsense going on there, now I'm not saying that it's nonsense, but just putting it all down to him when he's coordinating a larger team rather underestimates the bigger problem, potentially. But I agree with Sharon. I was somewhat worried by his demeanour. And as you've sort of amplified my remark from earlier on, I really didn't want to hear that one.
No, I mean, the interesting thing is, isn't it? I mean, I've mentioned Exeter Chiefs already tonight, and I'm going to mention them again, because last year you look very much that they were in the same position as we find ourselves in this season. And the action there was that they sacked their coaching staff almost. I mean, it was a night of the long nights. Ali Heffer, long-time Exeter stalwart, out on his ear. And Rob Baxter stepped up to more day-to-day hands-on work. And it's got Exeter back to where they should be. Now, are we looking at some of the other coaches lower and saying, has their time run? And I hate to say this because I really like the guy, but has Joe Shaw taken Saracens as far as Joe Shaw can take Saracens, Barry?
There comes a time in any coach's lifespan where they can't get any more out of the players, and they've just not lost the dressing room, to use the football term, but they just haven't, for whatever reason, they can't inspire those players anymore. I think Rob Baxter, although I don't know a huge amount about him, I think he's a different animal to Smalley, and I don't think we would be able to go down the same route that Exeter have gone down to get their mojo back. But yeah, it's a question, and the longer this carries on, the thing I thought, not so much, I turned off quite quickly at the weekend after that game because I had other things to do, but one of the other games I saw him interviewed afterwards, and he looked like a man who, to me, he looked like a man who was physically beaten. He knew what the problems were, but he just didn't know what the solutions were, or where to find them. And yeah, it is worrying. I mean, you don't want to see a man go down, especially one who's served us so well over the years. But at the moment, he needs something, and I really don't know what that is.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the one thing we can say about Mark McCall is that he loves Saracens. He cares about Saracens. And I also think that he has a lack of ego and a level of honour where he will be his biggest critic, Loxy, number one. And number two, he will know what's the right thing to do. And if the rumours are correct, there may be conversations happening between North London and a nice house somewhere in the outskirts of Dublin about someone stepping back from international rugby, which I think would be an excellent move for Saracens if it did happen. But I also think that we owe Mark McCall the opportunity for him to make that decision, and likewise Joe Shaw, who've been great servants, great credit to the club. Like Kevin Sorrell last year, we don't know the ins and outs of Kevin Sorrell, but the way that it was presented, it was like Kevin wanted to move on and do something else. And whether that's right or if that's what actually happens, we can shake our heads, but that's how it was presented. And I hope in Mark McCall and Joe Shaw and whoever else's case, that the club give them the opportunity to come to the decision that is correct, not only for the club, but for themselves as well, Loxy.
Well, I mean, Joe and Mark are two of the most decent and honourable men you could ever wish to meet, and two realists. Oh, they would always do the right thing. There's no question about that. I just wonder whether they've just, what I call Alf Ramsey syndrome. I think they've become wedded to one or two people for a little bit too long. I think they held on a little bit too long to the previous team, which has not benefited this one. I think they might be holding on too long to one or two people here. My biggest upset on the coaching side was that Saracens didn't move heaven and earth to keep Jack Pattinson and let him go up to Gloucester for apparently nothing much more that we were giving him. We just could have given him a smidgen of activity with the first team. This outstanding academy coach who's done so much work would have been a very, very good fill-in, perhaps better than one or two of the former players that we're trying to bring through. There's no criticism to anybody doing the job. I'm thinking of the ones who are now aspiring to do the jobs, whether they would actually be better than a young seasoned coach. Jack, before he went, he made it very clear, he thinks it's more or less impossible to sit back and defend against these modern fast attacks. He said you've got to have a team that's willing to win 11 tries to 10 if necessary. But he said the problem is about that is that you've got the senior men were still sort of getting 3 tries up, sitting back trying to defend, kicking the ball to the opposition, and they were running riot. And then we couldn't actually staunch the flow. Now, Jack was right. Now, but we've let that sort of more modern and progressive thinking go, and I think that was a mistake. Now, fortunately, Jack's been replaced by the guy who he brought with him from London Irish, Rhys Davis, I think it is. Sorry if I've got the name wrong there, but it's Rhys anyway, and he'll carry on with that sort of mindset. But what worries me is the mindset is there in the club, but it doesn't seem to have permeated the upper limits. It either hasn't permeated the upper limits of our older coaches, more seasoned coaches, or the older players like Ivan Van Zyl, who might be throwing interceptions just because he's trying to second guess himself when he needs to do something in a split second. Wouldn't honestly know about that, but I know that can happen. So, yes, they're honourable men. Yes, they do the right thing. Yes, the club should always offer an opportunity that they think is the right opportunity for both the individuals and the club. And Mark and Joe are owed an awful lot. They're both men I'm personally very fond of. Obviously, spent some time with them on trips and so forth. I would like to think there's a way through this, but like I say, I saw a light, a little bit of chink of light with Jack, and we just let him go to Gloucester, or didn't find strong enough to keep him. That worried me.
Yeah. Now, this brings me on to the last point, Barry. I mean, I can't make it. I'm not a season ticket holder anyway. But apparently at the end of the month, there's a season ticket holders fans forum, which could be very interesting, because who do the club put up to sit in front of season ticket holders who invested an awful lot of money and are liable to vent some frustration, shall we say? I mean, it's interesting to see who's going to be that person they put up in front of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't generally go to these things because, let's be honest, StoneX isn't the easiest place to get to, and it's a Wednesday, isn't it? On a Wednesday night, but I have signed up for this. Hopefully, I'll be able to make it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The timing's interesting as well, because from memory, the season ticket renewals came out last season just before the showdown. So we're talking towards the back end of the Six Nations, middle of March sort of time. And obviously this is going to be 4 or 5 weeks before that. So I wonder if they're trying to soften us up a little bit for some price rises, which we haven't really had for a while. But yeah, it could be a fiery night, particularly if things continue to go south the way they have recently. I mean, the fixtures don't get any easier between now and then, and yeah, it could be an interesting evening.
Well, you mentioned the fixtures, Barry, and perhaps we'll finish off by having a quick preview of what's coming up, because I mean, you come off of a defeat like that, which we're all disappointed. Nice to get a nice easy game against Stade Toulousain. Albeit at home, but I mean, the Toulouse team rested all their superstars pretty much against Perpignan last week. So they're going to come over to North London with lots of great players. I mean, that's a frightening prospect, isn't it, Loxy, on the back of this? I mean, what do you expect and what do you hope?
Oh, blimey, what do I expect? People were asking me at Leicester what I expected of Saracens at the moment. I said, don't ask me, it's impossible to say. You know, you don't know what they're going to do on the field. You don't know what they're going to do before they get on the field. Look, we have shown a recent trend to throw a lot of young players at a game like this and see what happened, and it actually didn't come out too badly last time we did it. On the other hand, I mean, is it necessarily fair to chuck these youngsters into the cauldron quite like that? It depends how much they value the competition. It depends how much they think they've still got an opportunity to make top four. So they're already 6 points off fourth place, and the schedule's not the most amenable one, and it's not quite there. It's difficult. I reckon they might do one of those sort of 50-50 hybrid type teams for it and see how it goes. I'd like to see one or two of the players who've had very little to do. I mean, these are the sort of times when Louis Johnson and Gareth Simpson reappear out of nowhere, and a few of the younger forwards. I can only guess at that. And what do I expect? I think we'll put up a reasonable show. It will be the shock of the century if we actually beat them, because they've got a good reason to come here to beat us. I just hope that it's not too traumatic of an experience if it ends up like that, if it is young players, because they don't need that, really.
No, they don't, do they? Although, I mean, the one thing you can say, Barry, is in a game where, you know, I've mentioned it before, playing in a game where we got beat 118-0, and it's probably the best game of rugby I've ever played in. You know, you learn an awful lot about players, and probably I learned more in defeat than you do sometimes, Barry.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. What's that old phrase? We either win or we learn. But Loxy's right. If you throw all the youngsters in and we end up with a complete and utter thumping, yeah, great. There's an opportunity to learn, but there's also an opportunity to knock some confidence levels for quite a while. So it's going to be a tricky decision, the selection at the weekend. I don't suppose we're likely to win whoever we pick, but we've got to try and get it right. And from the players' point of view, they've got to be up for this game because, I mean, if any of us were playing, we just look at the opposition and think, do you know what? Let's just go out and give it a go and enjoy the occasion, if nothing else. But yeah, it's selection-wise, it's tricky. I'd like to see changes, but I think probably that hybrid mix of youth and experience is probably the best bet that we're gonna put out the weekend.
I mean, the only silver lining to it all, Loxy, is, and we'll say this to the last point, is following Stade Toulouse and then away at Glasgow Warriors, where quite feasibly, we could well be out of Europe. We could be cast slightly adrift in the Gallagher Premiership. We then got a home match in the Gallagher Premiership against Newcastle Falcons, and then we're into 4 matches in the Prem Cup, which potentially is still an avenue for silverware this year. And maybe that's the sum total of what our realistic ambitions could be this season, Prem Cup.
Well, perhaps we could even use the opportunity of the fixtures coming up. If we can get something out the next couple of Champions Cup games and then beat Newcastle, we've then got the option of a little bit of a rest and perhaps a little reset and come back for the Prem fixtures after the Six Nations, which certainly aren't easy. And as we said, have a go at it and let's just see where it takes us.
Loxy, thank you for your time tonight. As ever, very brilliant contributions. And again, Barry, thanks for your contributions. I think we can give you next week off, and hopefully I can have next week off. I feel like I've been doing this quite a lot. But we'll say to everybody listening in, look, let's not be too downhearted. I mean, we've got a few things off our chest. If you agree with us, let us know. If you disagree with us, let us know and tell us why, because I'm sure there are those out there who still believe. We all still believe. It's just, I think we're quite right to vent some frustrations tonight, and that's quite cathartic in doing that. But Loxy, thank you for your time. Barry, thank you for your time. Thank you everybody who's listened in and joined us here on the Festcast, and we'll see you next week on the whatever it is next week. What is it going to be? The 14th, isn't it, next week? So yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday with another edition of the Festcast after we've put 50 points over Stade Toulouse at the Stonex. There we go. Yeah,
we can drink.
I'm still drinking the Christmas alcohol. That's half the problem. Thank you, everybody, and we'll speak to you next week.
Cheers,
This is the Fezcast.